Greetings, everyone, through here. Welcome to the Demo Hub. Welcome to another exciting episode. Today, we have a guest, Ryan Janssen, joining us, talking about a fascinating BI tool leveraging chat to transform how businesses get intelligence from their data. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure. I do a few of these shows, but it's always so much fun to do one with other data people. The conversations are so much better, and it's just great to be
Hmm.
in kindred company.
Oh, that's exciting. That's exciting. Before we jump in and talk about all data, which I'm so excited about, as you can tell, where are you calling from?
I'm in Miami, Florida right now. I've had a bit of a journey. I'm from Canada, lived in
Hmm.
London, UK for a long time, then New York and Boston and Miami, now in the States. And I spent a brief period of time in Japan during the pandemic.
Oh,
So
wow.
I've been
So
all over
you
the place.
a global citizen, almost like a United Nations.
I like to travel.
That's fun, and I'm sure the weather out in Florida at this time is pretty amazing. For me, looking out the window, it's rainy, kind of like the spring is. Being in London, I'm sure you can relate to that a little bit.
Yeah, no doubt. You know what? Of all the places I've been to, I really actually like the British weather a lot. So
Yeah,
it kind of gets out of the way. You know, there's never going to be anything extreme, which is nice.
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. All right, so today we're going to be talking about a company and the product you're building, Zenlytics. For the audience that are maybe new to this, just give us an orientation, the background, and what exactly is for someone who hasn't been exposed to that.
Yeah, happy to. So the strapline of the website says business intelligence you can talk to,
Hmm.
which is true. But I think that's actually kind of a summary of what we do. I would think of us as the self-serviest business intelligence platform out there. And our focus is on enabling those end users to be able to access data without having, prior knowledge of SQL, Python, and actually just making it really easy and delightful to use as well. I think the centerpiece of that is Zoe's analytics integrated sort of AI analyst chatbot. And, Zoe is built to take the place of that quick data pull with the data team and sort of help get those questions answered in seconds instead of days by emailing somebody or opening a new ticket.
Oh, wow. So talking about business intelligence you can talk to just brings to mind the very nascent ChatGPT, the large language models, and how that's taking the industry by storm. Is this what we're going to be looking at today?
Yes. So Zenlytic will do some large language model stuff. We integrate with its entire language model pipeline. It's actually an AI agent, but it
Hmm.
uses several APIs, including GPT-4. On top of that, we're also I would call us a strong semantic layer tool, which we have our own internal semantic layer if you don't have one, or we integrate with DPT metrics. That's a philosophical choice for us. We think that's an essential part of self-serve, both in the BI platform side of things visually, as well as actually enabling far, far better performance out of the language model versus what I'd call the alternative is text to SQL. And there's a lot to unpack there, but the combination of LLMs plus the semantic layer unlocks two really big benefits. The first is it eliminates hallucinations. We know that
Hmm.
LLMs can kind of make stuff up or try and do really terrible math sometimes. The semantic layer governs that LLM so that
Hmm.
it's not going to make up a fake metric. It's also all of the computation happens in the semantic layer, so it's
Hmm.
consistent and accurate. The other big thing that it enables is actually scale. And when using text to SQL without, having organizational knowledge in the semantic layer, it gets exponentially more difficult with the number of tables, with the number of rows, the number of columns to maintain accuracy. Our approach lets you index your entire data warehouse. We have customers, using, many hundreds of metrics at the same time across many, many, many tables in, very, very large data warehouses at scale today. And that's all made possible by the combination of LLM plus semantic layer.
Wow, that's very powerful. Seems like there's a lot we're going to have to unpack here. But before we jump in, why is now the right time for conversational BI from your purview? Is it just because the technology has reached that inflection point and users are following along, or is there something to it more than what we're seeing play out in the industry?
Yeah, great question. I would say there's actually two things that are intersecting right now, which make it kind of like a double great time. The first is, of course, what's happened in the modern data stack in recent years, and we don't need to motivate all of the explosion of tools that have come out for sort of building, maintaining, clean, accurate, robust, reliable data pipelines. I think that's self-evident that those tools are everywhere now. I'm of the opinion that the one area that hasn't really caught up is the consumption layer, and a lot of those tools are doing a great job at making analytics engineers' lives easier, but they're not doing a lot for the end user. And still the dominant form of consumption I won't name any names, but the old
Mhm.
school BI tools have been around for 20 years now. Some of them feel like they're getting a little dated, and I think there's more modern paradigms that you can improve on them a lot, put that way. So I think there's a big gap that's being enabled by the development of the modern data stack. The other thing that's happening in a much louder way, in fact, is of course what's happening in AI. We've been building this since before the revolution began. And in fact, Analytic originally used like the progenitors of GPT, so earlier versions of language models. But things really changed in December when LLMs really, really sort of, hit the
Mhm.
market in a big way. I really believe that one of the fundamental parts of enabling self-serve, it might not have even been possible before these models evolved, but being able to interact in natural language is so fundamental to self-serve that it's really going to push the entire industry forward, I think, including us. And I think it's going to unlock a lot of really exciting new ways to consume and use data.
Yeah, that's a good point you've made there because it seems like in computing, we keep going through to higher levels of abstractions from writing very low level languages to COBOL, Python, to SQL. And then now the most natural language, obviously, is the one that people speak, which is your native language. And English and those higher level languages seems to be where we're kind of reaching that inflection point.
See, this is why I love doing these with data people, because that is exactly true. When I started my career, I was writing assembly for
Mhm.
ARM microprocessors. And I've seen that
Yeah.
abstraction just work its way up all the way throughout my entire life. And I agree that that's kind of the final level of abstraction. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. All right. So you tap into you did mention the semantic layers you tap into for like GPT metrics. Are those the only layers you tap into, or is it also a combination of tapping into those predefined source of truth metrics? This is what my sales is. This is what inventory is. This is what profit is. Or do you use that in combination with introspecting and scanning the metadata within like your Snowflake data warehouse? Just talk a little bit about what happens behind the scenes to fuel the large language models or the conversational part of your
Yeah,
analytics.
absolutely. So we are warehouse native, so we'll only
Mhm,
work with the data warehouse, of course. Generally, we do a lot of Snowflake, but we work with all of the usual suspects, basically.
mhm.
And what happens under the hood is that the metrics layer is defined either, in what we call ZenML, doesn't even really have a name, but our own internal metrics layer or in DBT metrics.
So you do have your own internal metrics layer.
Yeah, we do. And there's a few things that we love about our internal, and I guess that we could get into just some really neat flourishes. We help define dynamic joins, for example. And I think the DBT is going to be doing this very soon with the acquisition of Transform, and we're excited to have that in there as well. But
Mhm,
the way that Zenlytic works is to the point of self-serve. We can take a little departure here. People love Looker. I think Looker is a great tool. One thing
mhm,
people don't like about Looker is having to define explorers over and over again, which defines
mhm.
table joins. That also is a big impediment to how self-serve works. And the reason for that is that when an end user comes in and is trying to use Looker, they often get stuck at that select and explore stage at the very start because they don't know which one has the right sales metric or whatever. So we've abstracted that out in our own internal layer. You don't have to specify explorers at all. You just specify essentially primary foreign keys. And when you ask a question in Zenlytic, it will do all the necessary table joins under the hood. It'll find the optimal route dynamically to perform those joins, execute those, and then perform the calculations on that sort of dynamically generated. We just have all these little flourishes under the hood that sort of made our lives easier and made our end users' lives easier. So we do have our own internal one. We're agnostic though, so we fully, we're more than happy as, and I think as more of the functionality comes online in the public metrics layers, the independent metrics layers, we look forward to integrating with those as well, and we support those now.
Excellent. And I know you're gonna touch on this in the demo part of the conversation. Is this a SaaS-based tool then that is accessible, or is this something that is installed, the CLI, on-prem? What's the delivery mechanism?
Yep, we are SaaS and cloud native. We basically do that to be easy to deploy, and we know that
Mhm.
you could, be an open source tool, but then people often don't like to struggle with setting up Docker containers and,
Yeah.
running and hosting and self-hosting can be difficult. So we said, you know what, the name of the game is ease and simplicity here. We put Zen in
Mhm.
the name. We're making it Zen, we're hosting it. And that doesn't mean we don't open source some of our tech, our core semantic layers open source and things like that. Yeah,
Mhm.
the delivery model is SaaS.
Okay, excellent. At the beginning, you did mention there is not a particular industry where you slant more towards, or you provide the platform and this could work for e-commerce, CPG, retail, ACLS, life sciences? Just touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are vertical agnostic. We work across industries. Funny story is that we actually started the journey focused on commerce, not necessarily for any sort of product reason. The product has always been very, very broad.
Mm.
We positioned ourselves as such for several reasons. I mean, really just to dig in, understand the problems of one group of people really, really well. And, I'm a big believer in the power of focus for startups. And that let us really focus on, how to solve problems for the commerce industry. And I think actually one of the problems that we make as data people far too often, like I said earlier, we have all these tools that make analytics engineers' lives easier. I think we need to begin with the end in mind. We need to focus on
Yep.
how people use the data, how it solves the problems of the business before we focus on, how easy it is
Yeah.
for us to set up for use.
Yep. That,
We
that,
started out in commerce though. We started seeing demand elsewhere. So like first in consumer tech, which is kind of a short jump, and then health tech, and then fintech, and now SaaS. So like other verticals have started popping up. So we actually dropped that focus. And, e-commerce and D2C will always be a big part of what we do. We
Mhm.
love the industry, but we now help a variety of verticals.
Okay. You are live now. Customers are actually using this and folks can take advantage of what they see today.
Yes, we are live. We've been live for a while, and we were, I think, one of the first apps to really
Mhm.
integrate the GPT-4 BI, for instance. But we were live before even that as well. We are live. You can try it today. If you want to jump into demo.zenlytic.com, you'll get a chance to play with the same artificial data set that we're going to play with later.
Excellent. Well, let's jump in so we can see Zoe in action.
That's right. Let's do. You got it right. I'll show my screen here.
Is
Uh,
Zoe, I think you mentioned Zoe is an acronym, right? Is that an acronym for something?
You know what? Zoe is an inside joke for the language people in the world.
Uh,
So, like, my co-founder and I actually met doing master's degrees
mhm.
in artificial intelligence. And we were doing that the year that Attention Is All You Need was published, actually. So we've worked with
Yeah.
language models. That for those that don't know, that was
From,
the
was it 2016 from Google?
2017. Yeah.
17. Okay.
Yeah.
Close.
And that was the seminal paper that enabled the
Mhm.
architecture of, GPT-4 and GPT 3.5. So we've worked with language models all the way through. A lot of those early models are actually named after Sesame Street characters.
Oh, wow.
So, the very, very first, well, not the very first, but like early ones would have been Elmo, Birch, and Ernie. And we said, well, we'd love to give our own chatbot a Sesame Street name as sort of an homage to those early, early models. And Zoe's a character that happens to start with Z as well. So it's nice and, didn't have to, well, you could just
Yeah.
call it Z in the chat bubble, and then it could be Zenlytic or Zoe, and hence Zoe was born.
Wow. So glad I asked. It definitely makes sense from
Uh,
that background. So, all right,
right.
let's jump into the demo. I think the audience are usually very excited to see what the product looks like in
Yes.
action.
This is the fun part. So I'm going to start here. You can see my screen, yeah?
Yes.
We're going to start in Zoe. After this, we'll probably jump back and forth into the full BI platform. I think there's really sort of three main modes of consumption. Dashboards, what I would call visual exploration, and chat, Zoe. So we're going to start in the third of those, but I think we'll probably get a little preview at both of the previous ones as well. So let's start here. I'm going to say, let's pretend that we're a marketing manager. This is an artificial data set for D2C cosmetics brand. Let's just kind of say, what are my top three marketing channels? We'll ask that question. Now it's kind of funny. I guess if someone emailed me this question, I would probably realize it's a bad one. Right? It's a malformed question. If someone asked you
Mhm.
that, like, how would you react to that? Like, I would say, well, what do you mean by what are you top? Like, what's the
Yeah.
best? Like, it's kind of it could potentially be a vague question. And we'll see the chatbot is able to handle that. So we can see how Zoe takes care of this when she's done thinking on this.
And so prior to this experience, I'm guessing that there is probably an interface where the admins would do the setup, pointing to your right database, to the metrics layer, to some, and all of that, right? To do all the configuration.
Yeah, so there's a self-serve setup where you connect to the database. In fact, we can just jump to that. Before I answer this question, I can jump and show you the setup really quickly here. I'll take us into, let's just jump into our data model editor here. And again, it's defined, you define metrics and dimensions in YAML.
Hmm.
Right? So voila.
So this is the Zen ML
This
you
is
mentioned.
ZenML. Yeah,
Okay.
that's editable, and we have an inline editor for a very closed loop editing experience. As you know, it's kind of annoying to have to go and like push to the Git, refresh the Git for the
Hmm.
dashboard. So like we have an integrated experience in line, but you can also do this in YAML. But
Okay.
digress. Let's go back to Zoe and ask this question. What did I say before? What are my 3 best marketing channels? We had to retract this from a brief hiatus. As we were saying, malformed question. Can't really answer as a data question yet, but we'll let Zoe come in and put us in the right direction. So she says, "What do you invest?" Okay, interesting. Yeah. So she's recognized that this is not a great question and gives us a few ideas for how you might want to clarify what the best is. She says total marketing spend, CPC. These are all real metrics that have been defined. She's smart enough to recommend real metrics, but I'm going to do something different. I'm going to say let's use gross revenue. Hopefully, this is enough to say, all right, now we're into a real data problem. What happens under the hood here now is I think there's always going to formulate this as a structured question. The LLM transfers all of the chat context into, as we can see, a set of metrics and dimensions, total gross revenue, marketing channel, all time. And returns this. Cool. There we are. All right. We've got top 3 marketing channels by gross revenue. But that's neat. We probably want some more detail, right? So let's drill in a little bit here. Just show me Facebook daily over the last month, whatever. And again, it sort of matches that very natural conversation pattern that you'd
Yes,
have with an
exactly.
algorithm, right? It's correction, it's drilling. It's been very popular, I guess. So we have some of our users who are using the business intelligence platform before Zoe came around now do over half of their queries start in Zoe, for instance. So cool. Now we're getting somewhere. All right. So we've got, this is Facebook, a marketing channel Facebook, and we're seeing it. Interesting. Okay. We're getting somewhere. Now I mentioned, I'll show a couple more quick things here instead of belaboring the point with Zoe, but we're going to jump into those other 2 main modes of consumption in the BI platform as well. You got a sneak preview of one when I jumped into the data model editor there, but I'm going to say, do I have any dashboards related to this? We also like to summarize. She can be a little verbose sometimes, but
Yeah. While Zoe is coming up with that, do you have a mechanism for persisting some of the queries where the user chat and ask for top performing marketing channels? Well, tomorrow I just want to replay that same result, so pinning that result, maybe touch on that too as well as you go through.
yeah, absolutely. And we can, so those chats persist. So like, we have all of your saved chats here.
Oh,
Those
okay.
are a persistent entity as well. And you go, yeah, I can see some things. Let's see. So someone is in here. Which marketing metrics can I ask about? And this was a very brief conversation, but it was persisted until the end of time as well.
Mm.
So those persist. Or the other option, of course, is to save them in a dashboard, which is still a very popular mode of consumption.
That's a
And it's
good point there though, because what you mean is that dashboards are not going away, even though we have this rise of conversational analytics. It doesn't mean that reports and dashboards are all of a sudden going to disappear. Is that kind of
100%. Yeah. It's funny because a lot of the newer sort of BI platforms love to talk about how dashboards are dead. And it's like they
hmm
try and make them sound obsolete, but dashboards are a very useful mode of consumption. Even in
hmm
chat, like I think, in this chat, which I think works really well, it'd be really annoying to ask about every single item in the dashboard over and over again, right? So like,
hmm
let's jump into the sales team dashboard here. I'll load this up. We're not going to go in and say, all right, hey, tell me subscription revenues. Okay, now tell me that for the OTP customers. And like, it's still a fantastic way to get a snapshot view from a high level of, what's going on in your business. So I don't know. It's kind of, I don't think dashboards it. I think the right solution is actually, I would say monolithic is important. I'd say that there's lots of ways to consume data. I think
hmm
what's important is that the user gets the option to consume data the way they want to, and that all
hmm
those ways are consistent. So whether you're doing a dashboard or asking a question, Zoe, you're looking at a single source of truth.
You're going through the same metric layer, which really ensures that you're getting the same numbers.
100%. And then I guess this is a great way to sort of bring up how we can jump back and forth between those things as well, which is neat. So like I said, the other meta consumption, go into the explore view, explore from here. Cool. All right, let's do that. Now we're jumping into the exploration view where you can actually do things, visually. So everything's consistent, of course. Over here, we jumped into a dashboard. And then likewise, from any dashboard, I think any Looker users in the house will probably be very familiar with Explore from here, which is kind of the foundational part of modern BI. I think it's really important because that jumps into visual exploration. We've also added start a chat with Zoe from here. So that's the way to transition back into the chat. So you could actually take this, particular plot and say,
hmm
I actually make this only last 15 days, only show it for my lipstick related products, for my top 3 states, whatever it is, and get that refined using a chat window automatically. And I'll stop and show you one other neat thing that we love to do. before I move on here, which is some of the stuff of that gets enabled by having a really great semantic layer. One of the common questions that we're always asked as, data people is why, right? So like we just covered
Yeah.
everything we've read so far has been what, which is actually the first most common question. The second is why.
I have a young one and getting to that point of whys, right?
Yeah, my 5-year-old is also there.
Yeah.
And so this I credit them with some partial inspiration for this product feature. Yeah, so like if we look at this plot, we've gotten the total gross revenue from Facebook. And we can see here it's actually kind of plateaued. It looks like it's had a bad week or so the past week. Why? So that becomes a
Mhm.
groggy project for any data person, or you can do it automagically by sort of scrubbing over it. And this is functionality that exists everywhere, whether it's on a dashboard or a plot in Zoe, or you just ask Zoe in chat, hey, why did that decrease in the last week? I'm going to explain the change in total gross revenue. And the semantic layer, our ability to join everything automatically gives us the chance to look across every dimension in this data warehouse. And we find features or combinations of features that explain the differential in that particular metric. And it does actually, by default, it does the period we selected versus the period immediately previous, but that can be adjusted as well. It then, so it synthesizes that into a report, and it uses some, makes a best guess. It has some ideas for what could be causing that decline.
Mhm.
We see here it's about 175K drop. The biggest one here looks like this promotion code, Facebook trial, is the biggest contributor. It's actually bigger than the overall drop, interestingly enough. It's a 175K drop. People using this particular promotion code dropped by 230K. So first off, it sounds like there's some code abuse there for starters. Look into that. But others, the thing is, that's actually been the size of that has been masked by this positive one, which is okay, this campaign, organically you coming in from Facebook for the everyday SPF cream is hitting it. Something's going good. So then the next question is, have we changed the creative? Have we changed the copy on that?
Mhm.
Can we drill in and just email some people? And well, yes, we can drill in if you want to do that. We, of course, as part of the semantic layer, we have very customizable drill fields. We're going to choose customers. This will give us a customer list. We're building an audience here. This is all again artificial data, so there's none of these people actually exist. But okay, so here's the people that bought, and it's like, okay, great. Like, go and build a thank you flow in Klaviyo. Go and build a lookalike audience. Go and email Alan Robinson and just ask why they bought or what they think of the everyday SPF cream. So like, essentially, what we've done here, so you can see our overall flow as we started off with a malformed question in Zoe. Zoe helped us refine that to understanding, what we were looking for. Ultimately led to sort of a CFO level metric here, Facebook revenues, right? Then allowed us to drill down, explain the change, build some hypotheses around that, and then build a very granular audience in a very short period of time. So like the
Mm.
nice thing is we didn't touch a line of SQL or a line of code anywhere. So I think we kept our promise on being self-serve. Along every step of the way, we do have, live SQL generation available if you want to do that. But most people tend not to look under the hood for that.
So really cool because the last step there where you have the final list with the emails, those are your segments that you can then send down to your marketing channels for campaigns to be run. With the SQL that is generated, I'm guessing if you took that and ran that on your data warehouse, this is the result you're gonna get.
100%, 100%
Mhm.
consistent. And that's actually, if there is some sort of edge case strategy selling or if you're debugging thing,
Mm.
whatever, you take that SQL and that's usable right in the warehouse. And that's
Okay.
exactly the use case for it.
Okay. And usually I don't worry too much about UI because I think that usually that always evolves. But I'm guessing that there is going to be an option to say if you don't want to see with a line chart that you can tell Zoe to visualize that with a pie chart or something like that. Are those options that you have or are going to be working on?
Yeah. So it's a full featured BI platform. So you
Hmm.
can swap plot types and, select colors and seeds and all the usual stuff you can do with visualization. You can also ask Zoe to do a lot of that stuff too. Our focus is on delivering the answers. I said the
Hmm.
number one goal, but when you build a BI tool, you
Yep.
always get those requests and you're kind of like, all right, we'll do that too. So like it's a full featured BI platform that can support set
Hmm.
of visualizations. Yeah.
Excellent. Brian, maybe talk a little bit about the enterprises seeing this. I wouldn't say it's an evolution, but there are folks that are in Slack, message channels. Some of those have this bot type capabilities where folks can ask and answer those questions. Is there a plan or a vision around bringing some of these conversational analytics into like Slack channels, your team's channels too as well?
Great question. That does exist today. I didn't demo it because we just use our native one, but
Okay.
it is fully available in Slack. And same thing, you can just add Zoe or add Zenlytic and ask the same questions that you would in the inline chat. That's actually one of the best parts of the tool. Like I saved that from the demo because everyone's seen Slack before, but it's very cool to see. One of the reasons why Slack is helpful is because a big barrier to effective self-serve is the login screen. And,
Mhm.
we used to do a lot of BI deployments ourselves when we were analytics engineers before we founded Zenlytic. And it's quite a common occurrence for someone to not be able to log into their Tableau instance or something like that and just skip it. By bringing the analytics to where they are, I think it's a very, very powerful mode of consumption.
Mm.
It's naturally collaborative as well. So people can actually like start a channel and start, riffing on things in a data driven way. I think it's very, very cool. And then
Yeah.
at any time, if you wanted to jump into, again, monolithic consumption across all those tools, maybe you did want to jump into the GUI and visualize something using point and click, or you wanted to save these to a dashboard for future use, you can do all that natively right in Slack and then jump right into Zenlytic, the tool at any time.
Excellent. That's really powerful. Meeting the users where they are, where they congregate, right, becomes very powerful and just reduces that barrier to getting access to insight, right? Removing one more logging I have to do to some BI tool. So
Yeah.
totally makes sense.
A big part of our philosophy too, actually, was borrowed from Notion. And that part of their product design philosophy is let people do the same thing in different ways because they all have their own individual preferences. And, maybe
Hmm.
someone would rather chat a Slack. Maybe someone would rather have a clean monolithic experience inside of
Yeah.
it. Maybe people just want to look at dashboards. Maybe people
Hmm.
don't want to chat at all. Maybe people want to just use a GUI. Whatever mode they prefer, you can get to the same answers with the
Yep.
same numbers in a consistent way.
The path to Zen is different for everybody. So I took that.
Yeah, that's right. Hip to Zen.
So, all right, let's talk about the pricing and commercialization of the product. I'm guessing not running a charity here with this product. So there's definitely some commercialization. Maybe touch on that. Is it by seat, by queries, or what is it?
Great question. So, yes, to date, so we've always charged per seat.
Mm,
To date, it's always been seat. It's always been kind of, I guess, kind of mid-market pricing. Our goal is to be less expensive than a lot of the old school, very expensive BI tools, I suppose. The interesting thing is I can't really talk about it too much yet. It's you're going to get the first. You're breaking this. You're the first hint. So the first person
mhm.
to hear about this. So, but I'll have to talk in hints, which is I will say we're hoping to be a charity very soon. So put it that way. And I think we're going to try and do our best to unlock access to tools like this
Mm.
for everybody.
In the sense that you're gonna open source it, or maybe
Well,
elaborate on that.
so what we're looking at is a way to, I mean, open source requires self-hosting and stuff again, but we want to make a big chunk of this free, basically,
Free.
long story
Okay.
short, and including the chat, because we feel like that's just such an important mode of consumption.
Hmm.
I have a big problem with BI tools go to market right now. And maybe it's because we're the new kid on the block, but I don't like how you have to get on a sales call with, seven
Yeah.
sales calls to see a product and things like that. I think that is a fairly antiquated way of actually, running a software tool. And, when is the last time that you didn't see, you had to do that with like a tool outside of the BI space, right? So,
Yeah. We were talking about that before the demo here in
yeah,
terms of just how relevant it is today for to make knowledge available so folks are not having to go through this gated process of talking to five or six and there is a place for that, right? Five or six salespeople just to see what the tool does could be very challenging. So some of the product-led growth type tools become very powerful because you can just jump in and try, right?
yeah,
Then you can get features and open them up as customers want to scale. But
yeah.
just that lowest rung of entry shouldn't be that difficult to see. Yeah.
So, and the interesting thing is that there is one thing about BI tools that makes it harder to do that, which is, setup for a BI tool can take more time
Hmm.
than if you're using Notion, for instance. You can sign up for Notion, you get an empty page in front of you in 3 seconds. That, there's a natural barrier with BI tools. We're going to configure some dashboards and things like that. So I will say the reason why we can't announce it just yet is because we're doing a ton of product work under the hood to
Hmm.
enable and make that process sort of seamless and magical for a BI tool for the first time. And, we'll be able to share more about that in, the coming sort of weeks, but I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be, I mean, it's the way that I want to run Zenlytic for starters. And I think it's going to be a tremendous value add for the data community. And it gives us a chance to really give back.
Well, more kudos to you. It's always good to hear that type of a vision. So definitely more kudos and grease to your elbow. Let's talk about the technology. I think you mentioned you leveraging some of the like GPT-4 and maybe some different types. Does the customer have, maybe for competitive reasons, right, have the option to say, I don't want to use the GPT-4 from ChatGPT. I need you to use this or that model. Just elaborate on what you're seeing and how that's playing out in the space.
Yes, we do have the ability to switch out models.
Hmm.
I would say it happens rarely. Right now, there are certain parts of the pipeline which I think are important to be handled by GPT-4, in my opinion. So, like,
Hmm.
we've worked with all these models, and in my opinion, the best comprehension is GPT-4 right now, and they have a fair lead on it as well. I will say that this is a very rapidly changing space. So, like, even we're
Yeah.
recording this in sort of early June. Early this week, actually, the first fully open source model was released, which is Falcon. It's a 40 billion token or 40 billion parameter model trained on a trillion
Hmm.
tokens.
Hmm.
And apparently it's the highest level of performance of most of the, major open source models as well. So, like, it's changing.
Was it trained from scratch, or was it just fine tuning maybe from one of the
I
websites?
believe so I'm not positive. I believe it was built up from scratch
Okay.
on the trillion proprietary tokens. So it's a great for the community for several reasons. I mean, first, it's just
Yeah.
more alternatives. I think it's great for R&D purposes because the open source community, there's millions of engineers working on this now instead of,
Mm.
tens of thousands inside of sort of the big research organizations. I think it's also actually really good because having a fully open source, bottoms up model allows the open source community to try out some of the other features that are hard to do with an off the shelf model. So that's like incorporating fine tuning, like you mentioned, for instance, requires the level of model access that Falcon gives you, or, RLHF, or reinforcement learning from human feedback. Those are all made possible by having access to this model. And then that community can keep iterating on all, not just the base foundation model, but all of those little pieces around it that make it work better. So I'm excited to see where that goes. It's literally changing week by week at this point. The pace of development is incredible. Our approach is that we'll be flexible. So, like, I would
Okay.
say that a great sailor cannot predict the wind, but they can set the sails. We will be agile, and we'll support, all models that have the sufficient quality to deliver a great
Hmm.
experience, including, even now I just got a call with the language team where we're talking about at what point in time it makes sense for us to, train our own model. Our models are already kind of unique in the sense that we have very powerful fine tuning components for them, which unlocks, great comprehension specific to your company's data. You can also thumbs up and thumbs down. And if the model gets something wrong, you can actually thumbs down it and it learns from that and corrects for future queries.
Okay. That's really cool. And you have insights into the questions that people are asking within the organization. That's gold mine, right? Because it's just like Google, like people are asking billions of queries every single day. Google uses that and they can make their products better. If you know what people are asking within the organization, just from an R&D perspective or development perspective, I think that's very valuable information, in my opinion.
It is very valuable. I will say that as a data org, we have
Mm.
a unique position on this, I would say, in the sense that as data people, data protection is first and foremost. And, for that matter, like, using this LLM plus semantic model, that ensures that you don't actually have to send your organization's external data to deep learning API, for instance. You can send metadata, you can send the names of your metrics, and that's the only actually leaves the, monolithic consumption. I would say that if we were to do anything like that, it would be only with an explicit discussion with an org if it was okay
Hmm.
to actually train. But right now, every one of our customers is only improving, their own model. So
Obviously, in the context of their own, because the questions will be relevant to their data and their own model, right? So that wouldn't necessarily go to train back your own brother model. Totally makes sense in a
and
very
I mean,
real.
that's important from a data privacy perspective. Of course, we're
Hmm.
data people first. It actually also is great because it maximizes model performance. Like, so,
Hmm.
like, if you're asking questions that are tuned on, your own organization's definitions and things like that, that just increases the quality of comprehension even more.
Exactly. And I think at the beginning you did mention you have guardrails in place to prevent hallucination. Can you
Yep,
just touch on
absolutely.
that one more time just to ensure? data quality and people, especially if I'm going to run my business on sales numbers, I'm getting from a question that I'm not getting something that is just made up, right? I think that's
Yeah.
it's an important piece.
If you ever want to have fun on a Friday night, ask ChatGPT to write your biography for you. I don't know if you've done that, but it's really interesting.
I haven't, but I might just try it right
Yeah,
now and see what it
try it
comes
out.
up with.
My wife and I did that, a week or 2 ago. We were reading her biography and it was hilarious, but it talked a lot about her time at Goldman Sachs and, like, her
Mhm.
career progression and, like, what she did there and what department she worked at, and it talked very confidently about her time there, but my wife has never worked for
Never.
Goldman
Wow.
Sachs, so these hallucination would be a big problem. It's like these
Mhm.
models can mislead themselves or the user, uh, in very confident ways, It's like,
Yeah.
very, very confident. So, like, the nice thing and when it comes to data, that is terrible. It's funny when you're getting a false positive in a biography, but in my experience, I think that sort of the text to SQL paradigms are, like, maybe 90% accurate on a good day, which is catastrophic, right? This is
Mhm.
business reporting we're doing here. If you're going to report, yes, we have, people use analytic for board reporting. Like, you can't be 90% right. Our approach uses the semantic layer, and so that intervenes in a couple of ways, but the most important ones for this discussion are, first, the LLMs are unable, and there's, hard old school tech algorithms in place to govern this. They're unable to use a metric that doesn't exist in your semantic layer. So
Okay.
you can't ask about your gross revenue from chickens and expect to get a real response. It will say, have no gross revenue from chickens, modeled in your business. Like, would you like to talk to a data team about that or whatever, right? So it won't give a false metric. The other side of things is all the calculation happens after the LLM has helped prepare the structured query. So, like, the LLM is only able to specify what metrics you're using, what dimensions, etc. Again, which are always, exist.
Mhm.
After that, the semantic layer goes and prepares a SQL. The warehouse runs a SQL. So, like, all that calculation happens in traditional methodologies. So you're not going to get a weird situation where, they're actually, the LLMs can also say 2 + 2 = 5. The model might make a mistake if it might give you net revenue instead of gross revenue. If you ask for revenue, it might infer, oh, they probably, they were asking about net or they
Mm.
probably mean net. It might give you net instead of when you wanted gross, but it will never tell you 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So the most it can do is write bad SQL that runs on your platform, but it's gonna actually still run on your platform and bring back the numbers.
Yeah, it
That's
wouldn't. So, like, the
mm,
SQL is actually all, it wouldn't even be a bad SQL. It'd be select, maybe it's the wrong metric out of two
yeah,
similar
yeah,
numbers. And, our philosophy for that is, in that case, by the way, the SQL is still written, by our semantic layer, and, the LLM is not writing any SQL. And in that case, our philosophy is to be very open about what it's showing. So if you say, hey, show me my revenue last week, it will say, okay, here's your net revenue for the last 7 days. So you always have opportunities to correct that. And if, it'll be explicit about what it's giving you. And then you can go and say, oh, wait, I want a gross instead of net. And we'll perform the necessary correct.
that's interesting. My head now is spinning because if the SQL is authored by your semantic layer, in my head I always assume that you get the embeddings from the LMMs and give it the text to SQL, and you essentially take that SQL with the right prompt engineering and execute that. But it sounds like you're doing something a little bit different.
That's right. Yeah. So we're actually,
Okay.
we don't generate the SQL with the LM.
Mhm.
I've seen implementations like that. It makes mistakes too often.
Okay.
I wouldn't trust it to generate SQL. Like I said, it's right 90% of the time. It can
Yeah.
do so. I mean, there's lots of things to unpack there. First, it can just straight up make bad syntax errors and just not run. Even worse, it can actually make a syntax error that would give you the wrong answer.
Correct.
And thirdly, I guess there's certain situations where if you stuck a human analyst inside RDMS, basically a relational warehouse, and said, "Hey, run this query," they would struggle to join those tables correctly, right? They wouldn't. There's nuance in that data set that they don't understand until you tell them, all the details in the semantic layer. So the semantic layer encodes those details, and what we instead do is the LLM only generates a structured input to the semantic layer, which looks
Okay.
a lot like, metrics, dimensions, dates, the sort of, usual inputs you'd expect for a semantic layer. And then the semantic layer goes and compiles that into SQL with an understanding of the semantic layer metric definitions.
Very powerful. And just maybe we step back a little bit, bring this at a higher level. All right. And being somebody at the forefront, at the bleeding edge, what is the vision here? What's the holy grail? What's the North Star as you kind of taking advantage of these capabilities and looking fast, reading the tea leaves, where do you think this is all going to play out?
Yeah. So I mean, let's start with the we'll start with the 60,000 foot view, which is
Hmm.
better self serve. I feel like it's been a long, long time that people haven't had great access to data, and magical things happen when you get a domain expert with fast, easy data access. Those two things together are incredibly powerful.
Hmm.
It's not done right yet. So like we will continue to be the leader in that, and we will continue to improve the self-serve experience for the end user. That's our overall goal. I would say getting more tactical, there's a bunch of neat stuff that's going to happen with Zoe over, the coming, weeks and months. I would say, and again, things are moving so fast, it's actually hard to like predict the future.
I
So
get it.
the hard part of the future is predicting it. So like, but expect we're going to have, I can see the paradigm moving from, descriptive to prescriptive to what I would call proactive. Right now we're very good at answering questions and things like that. I think the next step is being able to synthesize with domain expertise. So right now we saw how we got to, sales from the top three marketing channels. Maybe a future question will be, how can I improve my marketing effectiveness? And we can actually have Zoe go one step further and infer some solutions or recommendations. Hey, have you tried this in a data driven way? And, it could be, oh, listen, we see that, this particular, it looks like Facebook is your highest performing ROAS. In
Hmm.
particular, these campaigns are higher performing, but you're spending less on them. Have you considered adjusting budgets in that way? Like things like that. So like that's was what I would call prescriptive and just making, Zoe more and more intelligent. The next step I think is proactive. I think we see demand for this already. We see the baby version of this actually in that explain change feature that we explored. We've worked with some of our users and they actually we saw them explaining a change on like a flat metric. And it's like, oh, hey, like, when we're like, why did you explain the change on that flat conversion rate? Nothing's changing. And they're like, oh, yeah, but it shows all the stuff happening under the hood that nets out to flat, but it gives me lots of great ideas.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of the seed of like proactive analytics. And I can see a
Hmm.
future where, you log into Zoe and it's like, oh, hey, Fru, like, welcome back. Listen, I saw you were asking a bunch of questions about your churn rate last week. And I think you should know that overnight your churn rate is up by, 4%, amongst people who have purchased the premium plan. Do you want to look into this more? And,
Yeah.
actually having some ability to flag important things in an intelligent way to make sure that you always feel informed.
Yeah. That's very insightful there, Ryan. Somebody once said in one podcast I was listening to that the way analytics has been done now, if you think about just go back 5, 10 years ago, databases were built and modeled for SQL, right? Structured query language. And that was thinking of humans in mind, the folks who write that SQL.
Yeah.
But if these language models can understand data so much that we might get to a point where the modeling might not be done for humans to write SQL, it would be done so these language models could just
Yep.
understand the data. And that really turns things upside down. It's a fascinating thing to think
I
about how this is all going to play out.
I think that's super insightful. I will say it's funny because in our current implementation, we're already seeing that with the semantic layer.
Yeah,
So the semantic layer, every semantic layer has a description field for a metric, right? Those are written in plain text originally for humans to understand. But by making that description available, that provides a ton of useful context for an LLM to select the right metrics for your question as well. So
exactly.
it was built for humans. It's already being used by machines.
Yeah,
I think your point about generating, SQL and semantic layers and the pipelines using LLMs, I think is a very good one. That's an area that we're actively researching because I think, one of the bigger problems in the modern data stack right now is that it takes a huge amount of effort to go and build and maintain, well, everything, but like, especially like, a large transformation layer, for instance. Some people have thousands of models and that becomes very time consuming to maintain when I think it could be very streamlined and who knows where the future is going to stop. But like, yeah, imagine if semantic layers were truly that semantic, you know?
exactly. Yeah. And then don't even get me started when it goes from just beyond the semantics to actually cognition and epistemology. And that just would be a good conversation to have.
Yeah.
So very, very fascinating. This has been so illuminating seeing the product in action and getting your visionary, your thought leadership on this, Ryan. Really appreciate that. I'm sure you're online. You're not just building a product. I'm sure there's a community too as well. Are there Slack channels, Discord servers, LinkedIn pages,
Yeah.
or things we can call and leave in the description?
Yeah, for sure. We're all available as Zenlytic. So like the whole team's
Mhm.
around. But if you wanted to reach us first, the website at zenlytic.com. If you want to reach me personally, I'm active on both LinkedIn and Twitter. I bet you my name's in the thing below, but it's Ryan Janssen, Ryan, RyanJanssen on both. One word on Twitter. I tend to talk more for the end user stuff on LinkedIn and more for the nerdy stuff on Twitter. So please self-select or join both if you like both sides of that equation, like I do. And yeah, I love to engage with all of the data folks for sure.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for taking us to the Zen state. I appreciate you coming on board.
Thanks for appreciate the invite and I really love what you're doing here.